Unjani. Let's start healing. Hi, everyone. I'm Adrienne Murchison, and welcome to episode 33 of our Let's Start Healing podcast. I just greeted you with Unjani, which is how are you in the Zulu language of South Africa. You know what we say. We have more in common than we think, and what we have in common can change the world. I'm pleased to bring you a powerful and impactful guest to close out this 2019 premiere season of the Let's Start Healing podcast. I will tell you about our guest in a moment. First, I want to invite you to like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and you can listen to all of our episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and our podcast YouTube channel. This episode is brought to you in part by BE Decor's Interior Decorating and Styling Company, where interior decorator Lynetta Chanel Duncan will creatively personalize and style spaces in your home or office to complement your quality of life. BE Decor's specialty is creating living spaces, including she caves. Chanel Duncan's idea for she caves comes from her passion for helping women practice self-care. She caves are offered under the brand She Works, She Slays, She Caves. Visit BE Decors at bedecors.com. You can also find BE Decors on social media at BE Decors. This year, we have talked about so many things as we have woven our relationship with God into the conversation. And we will be returning in early January with season 2 and a whole new slate of conversations and other surprises that I know that you are going to enjoy. So today, my guest is Sheila Bailey. She is the founder of nolongerthefacefoundation, which supports survivors of abuse. It is a real honor to have Sheila on the show. There's so many different reasons that I appreciate her. She is a really genuine spirit. She's been through so many things, and yet she is hopeful, inspirational, and such a grounded, wise person. She will talk to us about her experience with domestic violence, which inspired her to start this organization, this nonprofit. Sheila will also share an experience of rape and sexual assault while she was in the military. She was in the Army, stationed at fortdix when this experience took place. And it's really something what she has come through. And when you hear her story, you'll probably think the same thing I did. And that's a question of how many other people have had this similar experience as Sheila, and we just don't hear about it. I mean, we've been hearing about so many experiences of rape and sexual assault that took place many years ago. We've been hearing about that over the last 2 years. But after talking with Sheila, I just think there's probably so many, unfortunately, other women who have had these violent experiences and they have not had an opportunity or felt comfortable or confident or safe enough to be able to report their experience to authorities or to share it with people who are close to them. So Sheila and I are going to talk about many things when it comes to abuse, and among them is emotional abuse, which is something that also goes on a day-to-day basis in so many people's lives and is not always discussed. It's such a pleasure to talk to people on this podcast who are so grounded in their work and their walk in their life and in spirituality. So let's meet her. Let's get started and let's start healing. Welcome, Sheila.
Hi, Adrian. How are you, love?
I'm just fine. People are going to say, oh, who is that? She has a nice voice.
Oh, radio voice. How about that?
And a face for the movies.
Aw, thank you, love. You're beautiful as well.
Oh, thank you. So I've been wanting to interview you because I know how spiritual you are. I know how close you are to God.
Mm-hmm.
And you have quite a story on a couple of different fronts. So one, you founded an organization called No Longer the Face.
Right.
And would you speak about that for a little bit?
Of course. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I always appreciate a platform to tell my story with hopes that, it will encourage, empower, inspire someone in some way, not just women, but hopefully something that can inspire anyone at this point. But No Longer the Face, the foundation came about, honestly, it wasn't even a thought. I was in school and I happened to meet this lady that had an organization called Sisters Circle. It was in Lawrenceville. And she invited me to speak at her event. Unknowingly, honestly, I didn't know what I was going to speak about. I'm just thinking I'm going to speak to a group of women about empowerment, which I was, okay, hoorah, I can do that. But when I got to the actual event, it was a room full of familiar faces to me. When I stood there and I kind of looked at the audience, I was like, okay, wait a minute. These women kind of look like I did once upon a time, being broken. I don't know how to really explain it, but it was like a different feel in the room. It wasn't like I'm walking to the room to more empower women that were already empowered, if that makes sense.
You could see their spirit.
I could, and I felt it. So when I came in and I saw her and I was like, hey, so what's the makeup of the group? Who am I speaking to? She says, oh, they're survivors. It shocked me to the point to where I know it showed in my face. And she says, are you okay? And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm okay. But everything that I had rehearsed in my head went out the other side of my head.
Did she know that you were a survivor?
No. Because that's not been something that I discussed with anyone. The only people that knew my story until were my family. I finally told my dad and my mom, and my brother knew. But my friends, nobody knew what I went through. So to me, that was like God's way of speaking to put me on the path of where we are now with No Longer the Face Foundation. So I get up in front of these ladies and we're making eye contact and I'm looking at me to some degree.
Yeah.
In different shapes and forms because all of us have our different levels of abuse. I went through all of them, the physical, the mental, financial, emotional. But it's like all of them were like speaking to me with no words.
Was it 5 years or 10 years or 3 years since you had been through your experience?
I left my ex in, that was August 22nd of 1999. And when I spoke at her event, that was October 2014. Okay. 2013, I'm sorry, 2013. So there was some space between that. And honestly, I just really kind of swept it under the rug and kind of went on with life because honestly, I got 2 children to raise and I left them. I'm done. Move on.
Right.
But I don't know. I was impelled at that point to really tell them my story. And that was my first time ever openly or publicly speaking about not only the domestic violence or that side of my life, but also being a sexual assault survivor. And I don't know, it's just how they received me. It's almost like I felt the commonness of sisterhood. And it was at that point, after I finished speaking, I went back because my son was with me and he didn't know about So that was different.
He didn't know about anything.
No, he didn't know about the sexual assault. He didn't know that.
Was that separate? Was that a separate person from your ex?
Yes, it was.
It was that after?
That was after. The domestic violence came after the sexual assault. My sexual assault occurred in basic training in the Army because I'm a veteran. And my husband, of course, I married him, or I met him after the fact. He came in as a knight in shining armor after I told him about the sexual assault. And he came across as being the person that I would never, ever have to worry about hurting me again.
So before we go any further, is that something you're comfortable sharing briefly to give us a idea of what you experienced in the sexual assault and then
of course
with the domestic?
Well, I'm at that point now where even though I know people say that you're, even biblically to a point, says, you're supposed to forgive and forget.
Mm-hmm.
And I have forgiven, but I'll never, ever forget. It was my drill sergeant, and he had been forward with his approaches for a while. And, when you go into basic training and you've never been away from home, because I'd never been outside of Buford, Georgia,
Mm-hmm.
And then here I am in fortdix, New Jersey with nobody. Literally, I knew nobody.
Are you 18 or 19 years old?
At that time, I was 18 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, some women might have thought it was kind of cute to have an older man, because he was much older, to have some type of interest in you. But it was just something really, really creepy about the way that he approached me. And then it happened like one night when I was on fire guard. And this is basically duty where you sit in like your barracks and you sit on the floor and you basically in the dark, you watch to make sure nothing happens. So you stay woke while everybody else is asleep. And you pull kind of like a shift.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not supposed to be upstairs at all once lights are out. So he came up and halfway, not all the way up the stairs, but he kind of peeked around the steps and he was like, "Bailey, I need to see you down in my office." So I go down in his office and of course I'm standing at attention, and he puts me at ease. And he goes, I've been kind of watching you for a while. He says, you real cute. He goes through this whole bit, and I don't know, the pit of my stomach it just dropped, because kind of like I could feel something.
Right.
And nothing happened at that point. It was just really an eerie meeting. And he goes, he says, "Well, do you have a boyfriend?" And I said, "I do," even though I didn't have a boyfriend. Mm-hmm. He says, "I know you don't have a boyfriend because nobody's writing you. You get letters from your dad and your brother." He says, "But where's your boyfriend? Why is he not writing you?"
Oh, my.
So I said, "Do I have permission to leave?" Basically. And he goes, "Yeah." He says, "You can leave." So I stood up, I saluted, and then I went back up. But I felt his eyes on me like, I don't know, it's just really hard to explain. So fast forward, we graduate. And the day that we graduate, they actually move you to another set of barracks, and you go under another sergeant. And I didn't know that him and the sergeant that I was moved to were really close friends. And we were supposed to have a 4-day pass because we just graduated, and it was a 3-day pass. And I didn't want to fly all the way to Georgia for 3 days.
Right.
So I had met a girlfriend, and she, of course, said, "Hey, you can go to Philly with me and my family, and hang out." And I was like, okay, cool, because I've never been to Philly. Mm-hmm. So I put in my request, and on the day of, I found out that mine was pulled. Mm-hmm. And of course, I didn't question it. I was like, okay, my request has been pulled. Storka, who was someone else that stayed back, of course, her family's in Russia. She's not going all the way to Russia. So she and I was there. I was laying on my bed listening to Anita Baker. And Storka actually heard my drill sergeant or my sergeant calling me. So she motioned for me, "Hey, Bailey, sergeant's calling you." I go up to his office. I'm standing there and the door is open behind me. And he goes, "Hey," he says, "I understand that my boy likes you." this whole like cold rush feeling came over me, and I could feel somebody standing behind me. I said, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "My friend, I understand that he likes you, but you won't give him no play."
Oh my God. So this is your new sergeant
Yes.
talking about the previous sergeant.
Right. And I said, because I'm not interested. He says, "Oh yeah." He says, "You should be interested." And before I know it, he has something over my face.
The new sergeant?
The old sergeant, because he's standing
behind
me.
you.
Now,
Wow.
standing here, there's a door on the side of the building. So he takes me, he drags me out and puts me in his car. And in the back seat as well is another drill sergeant. And he looks like I don't know, he was an African Hulk Hogan. That's how big he was. So the whole time he's telling me, "You say something, we'll kill you."
You are kidding me.
So we're driving, and it's so funny because I can see, like, driving all the way. He drove me to this Holiday Inn in Philly, and they had it all, like, planned. He goes in, he takes me in. The other drill sergeant sits in a corner and watches him assault me. And after he's finished, they leave me.
They just left you there.
They left me there.
And drove off.
Indeed.
Oh my gosh.
So you think about it. I've never been away from my home before. And I've never, like, that was my first time.
You had never had sex before.
I had not. And so for me, honestly, at that point, I truly did want to die. And I really, at that point, I just preferred that he killed me, because that's what it felt like.
Did you call the police, or what did you do?
I didn't do anything. After he left, I ran in the bathroom. And by this time, of course, you know the situation. I never did anything like that. So, and I didn't know what to do other than to remember that my girlfriend from Philly had actually given me her number, and I had it in my pocket, and I called her. And had it not been for her and her parents, and she knew, but her parents didn't. But I never reported it.
So did she come with her parents, or she just really? And you never reported it? And so when you went back on duty, you see these faces
I didn't
again.
see him anymore, and that was the thing. I didn't see him anymore. But when I got back, I still had, of course, I had graduated, so I was finished there. I had orders to go to Fort Knox, Kentucky. So I get to Kentucky, and they can't find any of my records, like none of my medical records or anything. And so I didn't think anything about it. That's happened, and mentally I'm messed up. But I'm too ashamed to say anything, because now it's been time lapse. So we get there, and of course I'm functioning. What is it? A standing functional, but laying down dead, if that makes sense.
You're dead inside.
Yeah. So I come from work one day, and the phone rings, and the person on duty says, "Hey, Bailey," she says, "you got a phone call." So I get on the phone, and it's this lady. She says, "How do you know my husband?" And she says, is this Private Bailey? And I said, "Yes, ma'am." She says, "Well, how do you know my husband?" I says, "Well, who is your husband?" And so she says his name. And she goes, "Well, I'm looking at, why does he have pictures of you, your medical records? Why is all your stuff in his trunk?" And I said, "Ma'am," I said, "I'm sorry. I don't know why your husband has my stuff." I said, and then I thought about it. I was like, I can't tell this woman. And she goes on blast, like, accused me of having an affair with him and this, that, and that. I said, "Ma'am," I said, "I'm so sorry." I said, "But I don't want your husband.
Is she the wife of the original drill sergeant?
Yes. And I said, but your husband raped me. And it's this long pause, and she just starts crying. And she says, sweetie, I am so sorry. She says, but you will never, ever have to hear from him again. And to date, I have never heard anything from him.
You know his name?
Mm-hmm.
What about your medical records?
So all those were forwarded. I guess she forwarded them because they got the medical records.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know exactly what happened to him. I don't. And I've thought about going back and,
Yeah.
But it's still the embarrassment to some degree.
Really?
Of like having that much space and time. But now wrapping my mind around it, I should have done something sooner. Only because I know what I know now, to maybe have protected someone that came after me that maybe even before me, I'm sure. Because this couldn't have been like the first time that he's done.
Right.
So.
Well, I mean, obviously you were traumatized.
Yeah.
And, that trauma stays.
Mm-hmm.
Did you tell your parents? Now, I mean, they may know now, but did you tell them like at all?
My parents didn't know until that day in October.
Well, you told them about your ex?
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Mm-hmm. And my dad was not happy. He was not happy at all. And I wished I had have told them when I came home, even after I got pregnant with my daughter, I still hadn't said anything. And the only person that really knew my story to that degree was my ex-husband.
And how did you meet him?
I met him when I was in Fort Knox, Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I met him. He's the most popular person on post, and I'm fresh meat.
Mm-hmm.
And of course he was older than I was, and I was actually talking to someone else, and he kind of downplayed the guy that I was talking to make himself look better. And we got together, and all along I knew he wasn't good, but being 19 and having someone pay attention to you, and
you felt a little safe.
I did.
Mm-hmm.
And only because with talking with him, he really did make me feel like he genuinely cared and he would protect me.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had nothing to worry about. And it's funny because he was no better than the person that did the other stuff to me. It was just in a different way. It was just a different form of abusing a soul. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did the abuse start a couple of years later, or?
I met him in 89, and he was real smooth. I mean, he was from Kansas City. I was from Buford. He was from the city. I was from the country. And his experience with life had been a little bit different than mine. He was on a fast speed. Mine was kind of slow, almost at a trot level. And I would say with him, the abuse didn't truly start until like after we got married. That's when I've really noticed it. Sitting back in hindsight, I mean, the abuse has started long before that because he was cheating. And then, he would call me different things because I would find out that he was cheating. And then manipulation, well, I'm not going to do it again. I'm not going to cheat anymore. And then I would accept him back. So to me, it started when we started dating.
Right.
But of course, I'm kind of looking over that because I just wanted to be with somebody. As bad as that sounds, that's
sure.
Really
I mean, I've been there.
Yeah. I think all women have been there. We've all been there. Yeah. We've all been there. So I don't know. Even when I wanted to run, it was almost like I had, you know how they use those shoes to keep men on the moon, the gravity shoes that keep them.
Yeah.
That's honestly how I felt in that relationship. Like I had on those types of shoes that just wouldn't allow me to move or to leave. And even though I knew the whole relationship, like just as simple as things like with him, we specifically one situation, we had went to a family reunion in Cooper, Texas. He had family in Texas. And when we got there, of course, this is all his family. The only true family that I had were our children. And I knew his cousin, and she, she really didn't like him too much. And she and I had connected because she came and lived with us a while before she moved back to Texas. And he wanted to go out with all of the other couples, but leave me there with the children. And I said, everybody's going out. I should go too. He says, I told you, you're not going. And I said, yes, I am. And before I knew it, he had turned around, put his hands around my throat, and pushed me up against the wall. So my feet were literally off the ground, and I'm dangling from the corner of the wall in front of the children. And, I'm playing it off so that the children don't freak out. Like, stop playing, because I didn't really truly want them to know that this was going on, because he would like squeeze my arm really hard, or it was just like really small things. Like, he was really, really heavy handed, as my grandma used to say, but he was really strong.
Right.
And, we would be on here like forever talking about my episodes with him.
But it escalated.
It did. It did. And it had gotten to the point to where I would never do this, because I'm so glad that I did have my relationship with God. But just being transparent, I really did want him to die. Yeah. And of course, if I hadn't have had the intervention of God on that side of my life, I think I really probably would have did something to him.
What was the point that you decided and were able to leave?
My son was 3. And by this time, he wasn't really a worker. I was working 2 jobs. I was pregnant. I was more or less the breadwinner for the home. And he wanted to go out or something. He would work during the week, and then he would come home on the weekends and then we only had 1 car. And he wanted to take the car and leave us there at the house. So it was me, the 2 children I had by him. And then we had also went and got the 2 children from his previous marriage, because his ex-wife was strung out. And the children were doing really bad. So I said, well, just let them come here. So it was a house full of children. So I was raising 4 children. And working full time, 2 jobs.
And you were young.
Yeah, I was. I was in my late 20s. And so he came home. He started taking a shower, getting dressed to go out. And I says, where are you going? He says, I'm going to a comedy club. And I said, well, I want to go. I said, I'll just call Mama and see if she'll keep the children. No, you're not going. And I said, well, why can't I go? I said, I see 2 tickets, because there was 2 tickets. He says, well, when I get back, no, how did he put it? He says, that's none of your business. And I says, well, what time are you getting back? I'll be back when I be back. And I said, no, it's not going to work like that. And so what I did is I grabbed the keys and I took my son and locked us in the bathroom. And he was beating on the door and kicking on the door and cussing me out and calling me all kind of things. And then before I knew it, he had kicked the door open, and now he's standing like right in front of me, over me, because I'm sitting on the toilet with my son.
Right.
And he goes, give me the keys. And I look up at him, and when I did, he punched me.
Whoa.
And that's the first time my son saw him hit me. That's like when this huge light bulb came on.
I just cannot picture that. You know what I mean? Like someone punching you. Wow.
And that's when I made up in my mind, I'm leaving. So I did. I slowly but surely I saved, and now we call it an escape plan. Of course, I didn't know what that was then. I just know I needed to kind of hide and put aside some money or something so that I can just leave. And it's so strange. I had family. My family is wonderful. You know, I had a supportive dad and mom, and a brother. I was just so embarrassed about the whole situation, because all along they had been saying, don't marry him, don't do this. And me, I was like, no, I love him. You know, you can't tell me, not to marry the man that I love. And I didn't tell them a lot of stuff that was going on, but I really just didn't want to disappoint them. And honestly, it was just, again, I said it was just embarrassing. And it's really not.
Well, is it shame? Because that's something I think that is natural that comes up with abuse, is to just feel ashamed.
You do.
Yeah.
And you feel like it's something that you're doing to bring this on.
Right. And it's not true at all, but it's a feeling that's inside.
It is. It was strange when I came home that day and I was taking everything that I had that I could fit in my little car, because, by that time I had a small car. And I'm stuffing and moving stuff because I wanted to be gone by the time he got there. And his daughter was older because she used to keep the children. And I kept thinking to myself, I really, really hate to do this, but I can't take y'all with me because you're not my children. And that was really hard for me. And, maybe some people would judge me, but
where was their mom?
She was in Kansas City. But for me, my daughter and my son, they were my children. And so when he got home, of course, she told him that we had left, and I don't think he really looked for me, although he didn't know where I was going to be. He didn't call my parents because by that time I'd already told my parents, I called them, told them that I had an apartment and that me and the children were moving. And they were just as shocked as anybody. Like, why are you moving? And then that's
And what city were you in?
I was in Flowery Branch. I moved to Flowery Branch. I moved from Duluth to Flowery Branch. And what's funny is that I was really like 10 minutes away from my parents. And once I did tell them, that's when, I just felt like I was at home again.
Sure. Because you had the love. You had the love. And I bet it felt like a big weight off.
It did. That first night, because I said when I moved into the apartment, I had got my children little small beds. But I slept in those, those big, huge wicker chairs, the round ones with the cushion. I slept in that thing for probably about 4 months.
Really?
But it didn't matter that I was sleeping like a newborn baby. You know how babies sleep kind of curled up? Yeah. That's exactly how I was sleeping there because that thing was so small. But I was happy. Right. I was at peace, Yeah. And I don't know. It's nothing like it. That's what for me, it's a blessing to be able to tell the story because I know that there's so many women that can't.
We got to this because you were going to share your story with these women. Where was this at, this event?
This was in Lawrenceville. It was actually at a church. And because of the nature of the event, I was kind of wondering because she kept saying, it's by invitation only. And it didn't really hit me until, like I said, until I got there. And then I started kind of putting the pieces and everything together. So after the event, I had my son take a picture of me. And on the picture, how you can just write on the picture. Yeah. I wrote on the picture, I'm a sexual assault, I'm a rape and domestic violence survivor. And it wasn't, like I said, I could care less about likes on pictures. Yeah. But it was the inbox messages.
Because you posted it on Facebook.
I did. And it hit me like these are women that I talk to every day. They know someone or even women that I know that were going through what I just came out of. And for them to talk to me, I was like, Lord, I said, I got to do something. I don't know what I want to do. And I was like, you know what? I'll just do a small event and I'll bring in some survivors and just do an after-before shoot.
An after-before shoot.
Yeah, because you do before-after.
Yeah.
But you do after-before. So these women would get to come in as they are because that's how they are now, survivors. And then I partnered with a cosmetology school that came in, and the women had to write down 6 words that they felt when they went through whatever experience they did. And then the cosmetologist would have to interpret that in hair and makeup. And they did an amazing job. So the women took all their pictures, dolled up, and then they transitioned into the women that they were before.
They were describing what they felt when they were going through the abuse. And what did that do for them?
For some, it took them back to where they were. The event didn't start until 4:00. So we met that morning at like 9. So we had all day for them, and some of them had never shared their story before. Some of them had shared their story before, and this was just kind of like okay, I did survive and I am a survivor. And then you had some women that just didn't want to talk about it. This was their way of expressing it, but just not talking about it. But by the end of the event, every single one of the women found that place, if that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah. So in essence, each woman was liberated to a certain degree, to the point to where now maybe there's something in my story that I can share that can help someone else.
There's two things that are coming to me. One is I am so struck by how reminded I am over the last several days of just going to the pain, how healing that can be. And then also, Dove did a campaign. Do you remember that?
They did.
And that was where women talked about the way they feel about themselves, which might be a negative thing, and then somebody sketched it, right? That's what I was thinking about when you said that.
And it was it was a beautiful, beautiful. I was really proud of Dove when they did that. It was supposed to originally just be a photo shoot, but then it turned into something much more. It turned into an event. So Lisarayam from Fox 5 came, and she was our keynote speaker. We had a few other speakers, and then we had someone to teach the women how to protect themselves just in case they were to go through that again. And then it was beautiful because everything that we had there was sponsored. So that particular event, we weren't able to like give anything away. After the first event, I was like, you know what? I like this.
Give anything in terms of financial support to women. And at that point, had you decided that you're going to call this No Longer the Face?
Well, we initially started out as No Longer the Face of Abuse. That was the name of the organization. And then I kept thinking, I said, well, it entails more than that. No longer the face of bullying, rape.
Yeah.
So it goes deeper than that. So I'll let people decide what they're no longer going to accept. And that's where No Longer the Face came
beautiful.
from.
And then it turned into a foundation.
Yes.
Where you have an annual fundraiser.
Yes.
And a walk.
Well, we used to do like a gala each year, but then I was like, okay, let's do something a little bit different. And then we'll still be doing our galas, but the walk was such an amazing success. This past year, we were actually able to give $5,000 to a mother that lost her daughter. And it was all over the news about her husband basically chasing her down and shooting her, and her children having witnessed that. But what struck me is that she was at the age to where she was in retirement. So now, not only did the children not have their father, they also lost their mother, and she's financially responsible for taking care of her grandchildren now. Which
so
I think is
how did the daughter pass?
Her husband killed her. He found out that she was leaving or that she wanted to leave, and from what was told, she ran out of the house and she was running from him, and she tripped up, fell, and he shot her.
And so the support was for her mother, who was taking care of her grandkids.
So, and that to me is where I get gratification. I've said this before. When we get funds, I don't sit on them. We find something to do with the funds. Like our account right now is probably, I keep like, I think 25 cents in it just so we can like, I'm just being funny, but I keep something in there just to keep the account open. But all of the funds that we get, it goes out. It's
directed. Yeah.
And we try to get as many sponsors as we can for all the things that we need. And the walk seemed to be the least expensive to do because it's in a park, you know.
How long is it?
The walk, we actually started like early in the morning. I think
I mean the distance.
Oh, it was a 5K. We did a 5K. And, you know, because we had edible arrangements to, you know, do fruit for us. And we had someone, it was a sign place that did our banners for the runners to start and to end. It was really a low cost event for us. So that's what we will continue to do each year.
And it's in the month of June, right?
It is. It's always the 23rd of June.
Okay. So have you healed? Do you feel that you've healed from what you've been through? And there's more.
Yes. I know.
But I mean, you're just so incredible to me. And you are very strong. I mean, visibly, from the time that I met you, you appear as a very, very strong person. And then knowing you, I know that you're a strong, resilient person and spirit.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you don't hurt or still feel vulnerable or you know. So I'm just curious how much you've been able to heal.
I would say I take one day at a time. However, I only feel like through my relationship with God, I'm still able to be upright. Now, don't get me wrong. There's been days to where I'm like, okay, Lord, I don't really see a reason. Even though I know he said, I know he's given me a purpose and I understand my purpose. It's just that sometimes it gets so hard to see a vision with clouds or with fog. If I can be, because I told you I'm always very transparent.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't, just because you get through it, don't mean that you won't go through it again.
Mm-hmm.
You just go through different levels of your relationship with God. Because I feel like every time you go through something, it just brings you closer to him. And then he proves, okay, I took you through this. Okay, let me take you through this too. So you keep building your levels with God. And then when you say, it seems that I am a strong person, my grandmother always told me, you never look like what you go through.
Mm-hmm.
How can you lead somebody to Christ if you look torn up? And I thought about that. I was like, you know what? That makes, it really does. It makes a lot of sense though, because you just think about it. Like, we know each other.
Mm-hmm.
And, I know some of the things that you've been through too, but you don't look like what you're going through.
Right.
So for me, you're an inspiration. That's the way we should be. Not to say that, okay, you sit down with me, I'm not going to be transparent with you and tell you the things that I'm going through, because I will.
Mm-hmm.
But I want you to know that we serve such a higher authority
Right.
than what is surfacely going on right now.
Right.
So I claim healing,
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful.
Yeah, I claim it. So I don't know what tomorrow may bring. I don't know what's going to happen within the few minutes that we're sitting here.
Mm-hmm.
But I do trust God enough to know that whatever does happen is his will.
You've come through an illness,
Mm-hmm.
and you're very transparent on Facebook. You would give testimony through video on Facebook. Inspiration is an understatement.
Oh. Thank you, love.
So, I mean, what kind of cancer did you have?
Lymphoma. So, I guess, 2017, I started having a lot of problems with my stomach. It was to the point to where, I just really honestly didn't even want to eat. That's how bad it got. And so when I would eat, everything I ate came up.
Mm-hmm.
And so I finally went to the emergency room, and they told me, they was like, oh, well, we're not sure what's going on. We're going to admit you. So I was admitted to the hospital in December, and end of December. So January, I was good.
Of 18 or
2018.
Uh-huh.
So I thought I was done. I'm good. So February, I got sick again.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing, same issues. And by this time, I had just started a new job. And of course, I didn't have FMLA. I didn't have any of this going on. And I'm thinking, okay, I'll be in here for just a little bit, and then I'll get out of the hospital, which I did. I got out of the hospital on a Thursday, but Friday I was right back at the hospital again. As soon as I ate, and this was funny, I ate grits, and it was coming right back up again. So they put me back in the hospital in March. I was in the hospital in April. And then in May, they decided that they were going to go down my throat and through my stomach to figure out maybe there's something going on.
Like an endoscopy?
Yes.
Or, uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. And they did, when they went through my stomach, the doctor said that they found a small blockage, big enough or large enough to keep me from feeling the way that I was supposed to be. So they removed it, and when they sent it off to pathology and opened it up, it was cancer. And so when the doctor came in and told me that they had cut out part of my intestines, and that he says, oh yeah, he says, when we sent off the sample, it came back positive for cancer. And I said, I start laughing. At first, I was like, Dr. Mason, I said, stop playing. He was like, no. He says, Sheila, he says, yeah. He says, it's cancer. He says, but, we want you to get well, get, your incision and everything healed up, and then we'll have to start chemo. And I'm thinking to myself, did he just say cancer? I was like, I know he playing. There is no way I could have cancer. So I get through the healing of my stomach, and in July, I go to my oncologist. And Dr. Chan says, yeah, she says it is cancer. And she says, we will have to do some aggressive treatments. You'll probably be in like 10-hour treatments each time you come, like 3 times a week. And I said, wait a minute. I said, I said, okay, am I dying? And she says, no. She says, you're not going to die. She says, but this is something that may reoccur. She says, but the likelihood that we found it early, you should be fine. So at that point, I'm just praying. I'm like, God, if you have to take me, let me be cute. I mean, let me be... Let me be cute, Lord. Please don't let all my hair fall out. Lord, just don't.
Right.
But I went through the treatment, and Adrian, oh my goodness, it was horrible. It's the most, I don't wish that on anybody.
The chemotherapy.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's horrible. And I thought that my hair was going to like fall out. But it did. I mean, it shedded really bad to the point to where it's like a portion of my hair was like kind of really, really thin. I just didn't show that on Facebook. I'm not going to let y'all see this thin part in the back. But again, he took me through it. Now, I said, do I feel well all the time? No, I don't. Like even now. But it's kind of like, I think most of our healing comes from our attitude.
When things happen to me, I think, what is God trying to show me or tell me? What is the thing that I'm to learn or to know that you might already know, so you're not experiencing it, but I'm, maybe don't know it, so I'm experiencing it. Or maybe there's a place that I need to grow or express myself in a certain way. There's different things that I think God wants us to be aware of. Do you think about things along those lines? Do you wonder or know what all your experiences may be informing you about?
Well, I thought about that with the cancer, and I prayed about that because I was like, Lord, what are you trying to say to me? And I don't necessarily think it was something that he was trying to say to me, more of what he wanted me to do, and that was to sit down.
Yeah.
Just to slow down and stop doing so much.
Yeah.
You know how you can get so busy taking care of everything else that you forget about your relationship with him. And even though I strongly I strongly believe in God. I do. But you know how you can get sidetracked with things, and not necessarily that they're wrong or bad. It's just that you lose track of why you are where you are and where all of those blessings are coming from. And I think that's where it was like, okay, you're not going to sit down until I make you sit down and start thinking about some of your actions, some of the things that you're doing. And like I said, they don't always have to be bad things that you're doing. It's just kind of like he's realigning you to the same purpose that he's giving you. It's just that you're moving away from it. My mind is always going, always, because I love being creative. But I think with God and the way that he talks, or now, since my relationship is completely different from him, it's like, you're ignoring a lot in you. How can you help, and I'm speaking from me directly, how can I help others when I'm broken down?
Right.
And I've been putting off a lot of things and ignoring stuff and not doing things. And then when your own house is falling apart, you can't help somebody else build theirs because you don't have anywhere to live, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
The other lessons about what I went through with the sexual assault and the domestic abuse, I don't know. And that's just being very honest. I don't know why I went through it, with the only other fact of like doing what I'm doing now. Like he brought me through it to bring someone else through it. That can be my only thought process on that.
Yeah. I don't know either. I mean, I know very few women who haven't been through such experiences. Is it one? I think it's like 1 in 4 women and 1 in 6 men.
Yes, ma'am. And men are less likely to report it than women. Men don't want to admit that, somebody's beating them, but it does happen. I was talking to a young lady. This is probably maybe about 3 months ago or so, and she's younger. And what society brings as acceptable behavior from men, like it's on a whole different level, even though the tolerance level for domestic abuse has changed. Don't get me wrong, it has changed, but it's still a long way to go, or we have a long way to go with how we teach young ladies on how they should be treated.
Right.
Because he beats you, or because he hits you, or because he's jealous, or because he don't want you talking to your friends or around your friends, that's not love. And I think is so misunderstood by the young ladies, and I was one of them.
Same here.
Yeah. Oh, he must love me because, he don't want me to talk to my friends, or he wants me all to himself, or, he slaps me every now and then he comes back and apologizes. It's still abuse, but mentally, someone asked me the other day, was like, I don't understand how women can get in those types of relationships. It's hard to explain. It is a very twisted, evil concept of brainwashing. Perfectly speaking of like the R. Kelly,
right?
Surviving R. Kelly. For the first time the other day, I looked at that whole thing, and I was in total understanding of each one of those women that had that happen to them, because it's easy for someone that hasn't happened to judge, well, she should leave or she should go. It's not that easy, because one part of your mind is saying, yeah, this is wrong. I know I deserve better. I shouldn't be hit, whatever. But then this other side of your mind is like, okay, but he really does love me, because in one sentence or one strike, he beats you, and then he comes back and he loves you.
Well, I think that we are, men and women, I think we're fragile. We're fragile creatures. A person who is stable and secure is not going to be violent.
True.
And I think that we're just so fragile, and it can be easy for someone to plant that doubt about ourselves in us until we get to a certain point in life, or we get to a certain level of esteem. I know that I've never been through physical abuse. I've never been through any extreme emotional abuse, but I will say I believe I've been through some emotional abuse. It was enough to have me doubt myself, enough to have me feel insecure. I think about, when did that happen? Like, at what point did I accept something that made the man think, a particular relationship think, okay, the door's open to continue to talk this way? Like, what did I accept?
Right.
I know now there's things that no way I would accept, but it's taken time. But there's that doubt. You said something earlier that had me thinking about not wanting to leave, not wanting to be alone, wanting to be in a relationship. And that was enough to keep me there in something that's totally not healthy. And I said there, but I mean, that happened all my 20s or 30s.
Right.
were not healthy relationships.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So I think that a lot of women, it doesn't have to be an extreme abuse in terms of emotional. It could just be you're just not treated right.
It could.
My cousin used to say to me all the time, love's not supposed to hurt. And I'd be like, oh my God, I can't stand to hear that. But it's not. Love doesn't hurt.
It does
not.
It
doesn't hurt.
It does not. It does not. How can something that's embodied in caring and compassion feel so bad?
Yeah.
And it's strange because we accept that.
Yeah.
Because when he used to tell me that he loved me, in the back of my mind, I'm like, how can you love me and you like seeing me look like this? Like you like seeing me cry, or you like seeing my eye look a certain way.
And inflict that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then just turn around and say, I did that because I love you.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
No, that's not love.
And you think about the people that you truly love, like that you love. A parent, your children, friends, people that you truly love. You're not going to hurt them. You're not going to harm them intentionally.
Exactly.
Gosh. Well, you're in a happy place now, yes?
I am in a happy place.
Yeah.
I really honestly am. It's taken quite some time, but I truly am at a happy place.
Well, I like to ask guests these healing questions.
Okay.
Well, how would you describe your knowing of God or your perception of God?
God has always been a staple, like in my life, even from a young child, from my grandmother and then my dad being a pastor. But truly, I can honestly say that God didn't really seep into my soul until I went through the rape. Like for the first time, just, I don't know, feeling like a part of your soul has been ripped out of you. Yeah. And a part of you that was intended, like hearing my father say that over and over again, that part of you is supposed to be saved for your husband, to have somebody rip it away from you. Yeah. But I think that's honestly when my true relationship with God started. When it flourished the most, when I started like really hearing God speak to me, is in the hospital. When I truly started hearing God speak to me was all that time that I was in the hospital.
Just now, like in 17 and 18.
And that's only because I was still. Yeah. And it was like, okay, so between the beeping and the blood pressure and the taking temperature and bring me food, it was just quiet. I had a lot of quiet time. And I think that's why I was able to really hear him the best.
Yeah. Yeah. I can relate to that. It's like God is right there, but we have these layers on top. And we have a mutual friend, Parrish, and she has a home in the mountains, and she had a women's get together.
I know I missed it.
Yeah. And when I got there, I was so struck by the quiet, and that just gave me so much clarity about everything we put on top of that quiet. I mean, there was so much stillness, and I had a sense of God because of the stillness and the quiet. And I was like, oh, okay.
And that's when he speaks to you.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So when do you most feel the presence of God now?
Every day.
Every day?
I mean, honestly, every day. I really honestly, and it's only because of where I've been, to see where I am now. Yeah. I wake up in the morning and it's almost, even when there's no sunshine, I can still feel his warmth. And for me, it took me a long time to get there.
Yeah. Yeah.
A long time. But that's all the time now.
You have a sense, we talked about offline, of what life means, the value of life. And can you speak to that? Like you mentioned, like eat, pray, love. You kind of feel you have a sense of what matters and what doesn't matter, I think.
I do. I've never been materialistic at all. I could care less about things, because they don't change who you are as a person, like who God created you to be. But I was telling you before that honestly, if I could just kind of get rid of everything that I own, sell it, and then just, I don't know, just travel and see different cultures and see the way people live and do mission trips and make a difference or an impact that even after I'm gone, nobody's going to remember, if I had a Louis Vuitton purse. Who cares? But the money that I could spend on that and make a difference in someone's life,
Yeah.
that's what someone would remember. Honestly, I said, I just want to be remembered as somebody who cared.
Mm-hmm.
That was not self-absorbed, because I think in this society or the world that we live in today, everybody's it's me.
Right.
But I'm really ready. And I was telling you, Eat, Pray, Love is like one of my favorite movies. I mean, I've watched that movie, I know, probably about 9 or 10 times.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, none of that stuff that mattered. I mean, because she had a really nice life,
Right.
but it was more of a deep spiritual yearning that she had to go outside of where she was and get away from everything that she knew in order to find where she really was supposed to be.
Right.
And I think that's what I view as life.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you have life don't mean you living.
I agree 1,000%.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I just think about my nieces and nephews and their kids that are still to be born.
Mm-hmm.
And when they grow up and have kids, and I'll be long gone.
Mm-hmm.
And then, my parents are gone.
Yeah.
And their parents are gone. It's just such a cycle. And I just think about what matters, like you said, what really matters.
Mm-hmm.
So nothing matters but love.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree.
What do you think that God calls you to do for yourself and others?
As far as others, I think what God challenges us, and that is sometimes a challenge, is to treat, and that's just like it's just so simple. It's to treat others the way that you want to be treated. I mean, that's always been something that my grandmother, my dad, my mom, that's what they've always taught us to do. But I think people need to have empathy. I don't think people understand, just because a person is not where you are on any level, whether it be a financial level or work level, whatever the case may be. I just think that people are, again, so self-absorbed that they just forget life in general. And I think if we just really honestly have a lot more compassion and we listen more than we talk, that we could help a lot more people. Mm-hmm. My pastor was talking about in life, you have a circle, and everything that you have in that circle is taken care of. Then anything over that, you're supposed to be giving out.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the way that I want my life to be. I mean, I don't always have to have the fanciest or the best, or just make sure that my circle is taken care of.
Yeah.
And then help someone else.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be the very best thing if everyone could do that. But some people have so much and they're so greedy. I don't understand that. Mm-hmm. As far as myself, I just think really God wants me to take care of me so that I can serve him more, or to be a vessel. Because if you see him in me, then you're more than likely going to want to find out who he is. I mean, you think about it. That's the same thing. We go back to what I mentioned before. You're not supposed to look like what you're going through. And we all go through something. We're not exempt from not going through things.
Right.
It's just how you handle those things and how you handle your life while you're going through it.
Yeah. You're very empowering. I mean, you may not think that you are. I mean, you must know you are. You have a foundation. But just not doing anything, just sitting there, you're very empowering. So,
well, thank you. I appreciate that.
It's true.
But that's not anything through me. So when the first thing I always do, I step out with him And he's at the forefront of everything that I do.
Yeah.
Because I could do nothing without him.
Tell me about a time when you had a miracle or blessing and you say, God totally did that. I had nothing to do with it.
So when I went into the military, as a virgin.
Mm-hmm.
And I graduated from high school as a virgin. And all through the time that I was in the military until I found out I was pregnant, I was telling my dad that I was still a virgin. So untrue. And so I didn't know that I was pregnant with my daughter. And I woke up one morning feeling kind of sick to my stomach. And my ex-husband, boyfriend at that time, he says, why don't you go on sick call? And so I went on sick call, and, of course, the first thing they do, you go in and say that you're nauseated and your stomach's bothering you or you're pregnant. And I said, oh, heck no, I'm not pregnant. And they said, well, okay, just take the pregnancy test anyway. And, back then you didn't get your results immediately. They would process or send it off or whatever. So the next day I come home from work and the person downstairs says, hey, Bailey, you need to call sick call. They called for you earlier. So I called my doctor and he gets on the phone. He says, hey, Bailey. I said, hi, doc. He says, I got some news for you. He says, your rabbit didn't die. I said, my rabbit didn't die. What is my rabbit didn't die? He says, oh, you're pregnant. I dropped the phone. I was like, no, I'm not. No, sir. I can't bring. I said, can I take the test again? He says, oh, you don't have to. He says, we tested it a couple of times. You're pregnant. He says, you're probably about 2.5 months pregnant. Mm. So immediately in my mind, I'm thinking, I can't tell my parents I'm going to have an abortion. That was immediate because I didn't want to have a child. So long and short of it is I planned it. Mm-hmm. I was going to go like a couple of days later. I would go to the clinic. They would give me a shot. The next day I would have her. Done deal. She'd be dead. Mm-hmm. And so that day that I got up to go on to the appointment, the first sergeant just happened to need a driver. The driver that he usually has called out sick and I could drive. So he's like, hey, Bailey, I need you to take me out to the range. We're driving out to the range and, the Humvee, and it's snow everywhere because we're in Kentucky. Mm-hmm. And he gets out and he goes to the range to check on the people qualifying. And I'm sitting there and I promise you, Adrian, my stomach had never moved. I didn't have any sense at all that I was pregnant. Mm-hmm. And I looked down and my stomach started looking like water.
What?
I promise you, it freaked me out because I'm like, okay, I know that there's a baby there. Uh-huh. But she should not be moving.
And you're just like 2.5 months.
Yeah, my stomach should not be moving. So I jump out of the truck and I'm running towards the first sergeant and he's running towards me and he goes, what's wrong with you, Bailey? And I was like, first sergeant, I'm pregnant and I was going to go and have an abortion, and I'm just crying, I'm hysterical. And at that moment, I knew it had to be God.
Yeah.
Because now I have a 29-year-old beautiful daughter. And it's because of God. Uh-huh. It couldn't have been nobody else but other than him to do that. Yeah. So that's my...
Does she know that story?
She does. But what's funny is that she didn't know it until she read my book.
Really? Mm-hmm. And tell us the title of your book.
My book was Willow Silent Cries.
Say it again.
Willow Silent Cries.
Willow Silent Cries. Mm-hmm. It's a memoir.
It was supposed to be a trilogy, 3 books. That was the first one. So
you're working on the second one.
I'm working on it. I am working on it.
Where's the book available?
It's on Amazon.
Okay.
It's on Amazon. And it's under Sheila B. But the name of the book is Willow Silent Cries.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Are you a seeker or a healer or both?
That's a good question. I would say both. I honestly would say both. More along the lines of a healer, though. To me, it's imperative in my life only because of what I've been through. I just never want any woman to ever feel like she's alone in any situation. Not just with domestic violence and sexual assault, but just in life in general. And I think as women, just our bonds are a lot different than men because we hold so much.
We do.
And sisterhood, to me, it can be a variety of things. I don't have to know you for you to be my sister.
Mm-hmm.
But if you come to me and you talk to me, that makes you my sister. And what you're going through becomes part of me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we all took that to hand, you know, just to lend an ear, share some of your time, you know, and just, like, again, you know, have some empathy for those that are around us, I think we could all heal a lot quicker.
Yeah, because we're all connected.
We all
We
are.
act like we're not.
We are.
But we are connected.
We are.
Yeah.
We are. I know.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you, love. I thank you. You had me dig deep for some stuff.
Did I?
Yes, you did. I thank you for this opportunity. I do.
I really appreciate it. How can people get in touch with you if they're interested in No Longer the Face?
Well, we are, of course, our website is nolongertheface.com. Mm-hmm. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or they can email us as well at nolongertheface@gmail.com.
Okay.
You are a blessing.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
You are a blessing to everyone.
Well, thank you.
So, thank you, Sheila. About maybe a week and a half or less after our conversation for this podcast, Sheila went back into the hospital, and we wish her all the best. Our prayers and thoughts are with Sheila. I have communicated with her. She's as loving a spirit as ever. I ask you to just hold her high and wish her all the best. Thank you for joining us. That's a wrap for season 1 of the Let's Start Healing podcast. We will be returning in early January of 2020 with a whole new slate of episodes and surprises. In the meantime, remember you can listen to all of our episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and the podcast YouTube channel. And in the meantime, be sure to follow us on Instagram and like us on Facebook. Let's start healing.